Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today it is time for the April wrap up. April turned out to be a very bountiful reading month for me, and I don't really know why. I didn't feel like I was reading more than my average, but there's a lot of books here. So with no further ado, let's take a look at what we have. And this time I organized them kind of thematically. I usually just go straight through in the order that I read them, but it made more sense this time to group them by their themes or reading challenges or reasons that I was reading them. So I'm going to start with Trans Girl April. I really enjoyed Trans Girl April. This was a reading challenge hosted by Kevy at Say Kevy and Willow at Books and Bow, encouraging all of us to read books by trans and non-binary authors in the month of April. But don't stop there, because I'm not going to. This was so fun, and by watching other people's videos and reading people's comments, I picked up a lot of great ideas for further reading, people that I've added to my TBR. So this was a winner. This was a new reading challenge, and I really enjoyed it. All right, so here's the books that I did read for this challenge, and I have returned all of these to the library, so I will put pictures up to go with them. I read Trans-Galactic Bike Ride, which was an anthology of, if I remember correctly, it was feminist bicycle science fiction stories by trans and non-binary authors, which seems like a very niche category. And apparently there's an entire series of science fiction feminist bike stories, and then this particular edition was the trans edition. They were science fiction. They took place in, some of them were on Earth, some of them were in outer space, on space stations. Some of them were super short, some of them were more of a standard short story length, fast-paced and buoyant and positive and just really a little happy bolt of fun reading. I read a children's book called Too Bright to See by Kyle Lukoff. The author is a trans man. I think I forgot to mention that Trans-Galactic Bike Ride was edited by Lydia Rogue. Okay, so Too Bright to See was about a child named Bug who is living in the summer before middle school, and it is a realization and coming out story about a trans boy. I also read Felix Ever After by Kacen Callender. This was the book that was selected for the discussion group by the Trans Girl April host, and I did not attend the discussion group. My reading times were off or something, but I really enjoyed the book. It was a delightful young adult romance about a trans boy named Felix, and it wasn't just about trans issues. It was just like a teenage story. It's about romance, trying to figure out attractions and relationships, and he's working on his relationship with his father, and it was very realistic with the tensions between a teenager and the dad, and also what's going to happen, because they're going into senior year in this story, and they're thinking about college, and there's what do I want to do issues and financial issues, and the whole thing was very realistic and very just kind of uplifting and wholesome, the way that things turned out. I just love that book. And then finally, the fourth one that I read for this theme was The Deep by Rivers Solomon, which was a really unusual fantasy story. This book asks us to imagine that when women were thrown overboard during the years of the slave trade, when people were traveling on ships and sometimes threw pregnant women overboard to save themselves the hassle of a woman giving birth on the ship, that although the woman would die down in the ocean, she would give birth and this child would live but be transformed into a different kind of aquatic being called the Wajinru. But they are the descendants of the slave women. It's about Yetu, the keeper of memories in this society. I did also start Pet by Akwaeke Emeze. I I started it, but then I put it aside because I really need to focus on reading my last book for the Booktube judging, but I think I'll come back to it in between that and my next book, and so it'll actually be a May book. Another thing that I've been working on in April and finishing in May is reading books in my field, which is Group D for the Booktube Fiction Prize Judging. And I had previously read 3 of them, and then in April I read 2 more of them. The Daughter of Dr. Moreau by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, and Trespasses by Louise Kennedy. I do have Trespasses here. The Daughter of Dr. Moreau went back to the library, so I can't discuss my thoughts on these 2 books, but I will be making a video about the 6 books that I am reading for the Booktube Prize judging after May has completed. Right at the end or beginning of June, I will put out a video about the 6 books, my thoughts on each book, and how I end up ranking them, which is going to be a challenge. I'm reading the last book now, so I don't know, but I'm starting to formulate some thoughts, and I don't know, it's just really hard. But stay tuned for that. I accidentally read my mental health May book early. This is a May reading event hosted by Kim at Middle of the Book March and Marilyn at Marilyn Maya Mendoza, but I accidentally read it early, and if you watched my, I think it was in my last video, I explained what happened when I accidentally took that book on a weekend trip instead of my murder mystery. And it turned out to be a happy accident because I really enjoyed the book. So if you're considering participating, I strongly encourage you to do so, and that book would be a great place to start. I guess I'm open in May now. I'm looking to see if any of the books I had already selected for my TBR could double dip for Mental Health May as a second read, or I might find something else to also add to my roster for May. But I did read that one. I sent it back to the library already, so I guess there's been a picture up here. So that means that the rest of the books that I read in April were just the free choice, the as the wind blows, mood reading, whatever I felt like books. There was one DNF, which I talked about, I don't know, last time or maybe a couple videos back, and that was Liberation Day by George Saunders. I read most of the stories. I didn't read a couple. I got a certain point through, and then I liberated myself and sent that book back to the library. It was kind of a mixed bag. I received a lot of great comments from Saunders fans and not Saunders fans, and I will keep all these things in mind and probably include at least one of his stories in my Shorty September project when we get to it. So I haven't abandoned him entirely, but he's not at my forefront right now. Then the rest of them were successes. I read Elena Knows by Claudia Pineiro. It feels like longer ago. I guess this was at the very beginning of the month, because I feel like I read this earlier in the year, but no, it was this month. I checked my calendar. And this was a wonderful book. It was translated by Francis Riddle. It takes place in Buenos Aires. It's the story of Elena, who has advanced Parkinson's disease and is very much trapped in her body and limited in her movements, and is basically lives from pill to pill when she gets a little window when she can move a little more freely. She can't look up. Her neck is stiff in a downward position. She can barely walk. But she wants to make her way across the city to visit someone that she thinks might be able to help her solve the recent death of her daughter, which has been ruled a suicide, but Elena does not feel that that is accurate. And it is a hard, wrenching kind of book. It's short. You know, when you tell someone a book is really, really good but devastating, like, here, would you go ahead and devastate yourself? I need you to read this and so we can talk about it. It's one of those books. It's just so good. I also read I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Makkai. I haven't seen a lot of people talking about this book on Booktube, maybe just 1 or 2 reviewers. I enjoyed it a lot. It was not the kind of hard-hitting literary achievement that her book, The Great Believers, that was a Pulitzer Prize finalist a few years ago. That was a beautiful book about life during the AIDS epidemic, and then there was like a present day part as well. This one was a murder mystery and kind of a reckoning with the past about a woman who goes back to the elite boarding school that she attended in the 90s and helps some kids make a podcast. And one of the kids decides to focus on a murder that occurred during Bodie, the main woman's senior year, and that possibly the wrong person had been convicted for that crime. And it just stirs up a lot of crap, and for Bodie and for everybody else. But it's really good. When I talked about it before, it's good in the way that a good Laura Lippman or Tana French book is, a mystery that has an elevated level of writing to it and deeper themes and character issues than just someone was murdered, we solved it at the end. So on that level, it's really successful, I think. But some people probably would be disappointed that wanted a book that was more akin to The Great Believers in tone or style or complexity. I also reread Persuasion. I guess last week I talked about it, and I just love this book so much. Something I left out in my discussion was Captain Benwick, but then I realized when I was mentioning this in a comment that I can't talk about him without too many spoilers. But if you have read this book, just pause for a second to appreciate our nerdy bookworm friend, Captain Benwick, who is grieving for his fiance who has passed, but he's right there he's like a cheerful person who's had a hard blow, but he's right at that point of life where he's ready to live again. And he doesn't get enough airtime in this story. I really like that character, and I like to think about some alternative pathways that the story could have taken other than the way that it did, which I think Captain Benwick is perfectly happy with, but sometimes I'm not that satisfied. I guess I'm thinking some thoughts along the lines of what Captain Wentworth thinks about Captain Benwick's events. Maybe I need to start a Discord or something where we can just talk about Jane Austen with the spoilers. I don't know. Let me know. Okay, this was all the way. This might have been the first book of the month. The Night Ship by Jess Kidd. Loved this book. I need more people to read this book and talk about it. Jess Kidd is our household discovery this year so far. We're working our way, both of us, through the books, and I haven't hit any clunkers yet. I've only read this one. Anyway, I'm reading Mr. Flood's Last Resort this month, and then there's 2 more books to get to. But this was a wonderful story with 2 storylines, one in the 1600s and one in the 1989 was the year of the other one. There's a child in each story. They are rendered excellently. They are not those child characters that seem unrealistic. It can be a tricky thing when an adult book has a main character that's a child, but Jess Kidd handles it masterfully in this book. We have a little girl on a ship in the 1600s, and we have a little boy in the more contemporary time setting who is sent to live on a remote fishing island off the coast of Australia, which is the site where the ship in the past sunk. So these 2 storylines converge in really interesting ways and parallel each other in really interesting ways. And the 2 characters, Macon and Gil, are just really memorable. Last but not least, I read City Under One Roof by Iris Yamashita. This was the book that I meant to take on my weekend trip, but I messed up and took Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. And so then I read that book. It was good, but I circled back to City Under One Roof when I got home, and I inhaled this book. This one snuck in under the wire for April because I read it in 2 days because I just had to keep reading it. So this is a murder mystery. This is for the people who love the mysteries and the thrillers, and they like to read something like this, maybe in between the more serious fare. And there's nothing high-minded or literary about it, but it is great fun. And I have found out that there's going to be a sequel. Because one thing about this book was when it ended, I thought, wait a minute, did she leave these loose threads on purpose? Like, is she one of those authors that just kind of leaves things a little off kilter for you to just sit there with for the rest of your life? Which I'm one of the people that actually loves it when that happens, when things are just kind of left unsettled, and you're just left going, oh, now what am I supposed to do with this? I like those books, but it was so, the ending, and when I say the ending, I mean the very, very last moment of the book ending leaves you with, what? Wait a minute, what? And then it's over. So I did have to look up and see if there was going to be a sequel, and there is a sequel coming. So, thank goodness. But this is a book about a weird town in Alaska that's basically a high-rise, and everything and everybody is in the high-rise. In the summer, there's a tourist season, and there's more going on, and people rent rooms. People live in the apartments in this building, and then there's rooms that are for rent. And in the summer, there's people that, they rent boats and sea-doos and things like that, and they go out and look at glaciers and whale watching and stuff like that. But in the winter, they just kind of hole up in this place. There's a couple of really crappy restaurants and one store. Everybody who lives there is weird. And early on in the story, we find out this is the kind of place where people are living there because it's so remote, because they have gotten away from somebody or something, and they don't want anybody bothering them. And so they're living basically in this outpost of civilization. And a murder has possibly occurred. Some body parts have washed up. And the police are thinking maybe it was a suicide out at sea, and then the body just kind of disintegrated. But Kara, what's her last name? Kara Kennedy shows up, and she has a personal reason to want to investigate it a little further. I won't tell you what it is, but she shows up to look into it a little more, and you get the trope of we don't like outsiders. You need to go on back to Anchorage, bye-bye. But then there's a blizzard, of course, the minute she gets there, and then everybody's stuck in there together. So it becomes a locked room mystery, and the people that live there are wonderfully bizarre. Every character has secrets. Most of them are offbeat and strange in some manner or another. My favorite weird character is a lounge singer from Japan. She wears risque attire in her lounge act. Apparently she was big in Japan, and so nobody knows why she came out to this remote place, and she's not telling. And she has this collection of creepy, realistic dolls, and every year she has a birthday party for a daughter. Nobody knows if the daughter is imaginary or that she had a daughter and the daughter passed away, but she pays the kids in the building to attend this birthday party where she gives them money, and they have a birthday party and eat cake, and she opens a present, and the present's another creepy doll for her collection. So she's my favorite weird person in the story. She and Lonnie, who's really a more significant character in the story, and I don't want to spoil about Lonnie's character. But anyway, lots of fun for the mystery lovers. I think that might be my last book. So that was April. There was a lot, and it was almost 100% good stuff. One D and F, and that was a mostly F. I just wasn't that into it. It wasn't terrible, but it was a good month. And May has begun, and I'm enjoying it already. So let me know what your favorite book was from the month of April, or if there was a deep dark dud. so I can avoid it. And I will talk to you again soon. I think I will finally have my long lost or long awaited haul video next week. I ordered some books that have been traveling on, I don't know, like a tortoise who's riding on top of a sloth or something. But they're finally supposed to finish getting here today, so maybe I can put that video together soon. Anyway, have a great week. I'll be back for Friday reads. Hope you're having an excellent reading week. Talk to you later.